following story is true. The names have been changed at the request of the survivors. After all, this is a horror fiction podcast.
PseudoPod, episode 852, February 10th, 2023. Every body depicted is exploited by Elise Lesage. Narrated by Kitty Sarkozy, audio by Chelsea Davis. Welcome everybody. I'm Adrian Howard, Associate Editor at PseudoPod, and your host for this week's story. I know, you are hoping for Alistair's melodious tones. Don't worry, the sacrifice was made on schedule, his annual molting went very smoothly, and he'll be back as soon as the new vocal membranes have dried and finished curing. This week's story is Every Body Depicted is Exploited by Elise Lesage, first published in Pop Cult's gruesome love anthology as Crit. Elise is a writer, freelance book publicist, and exhausted retail worker based in Portland, Oregon. Their fiction and poetry has appeared in several publications, including UCLA's West Wind, Nymeria Publishing's Descendants of Medusa anthology, and Virginia Commonwealth University's Poitem Journal. You can find Elise on Instagram as e.sages, and they would like to dedicate this story to Rachel. Our narrator this week is Kitty Sarkozy. Kitty is a speculative fiction writer, actor, and robot girlfriend. Several large cats allow her to live with them in Marietta, Georgia. She enjoys tending the extensive gardens where she hides the bodies. For a list of her publications, acting credits, or to engage her services on your next project, go to kittysarkozy.com. And now, we have a love story for you. And we promise you, it's true.
Every Body Depicted is Exploited. Written by Elise Lesage. Read by Kitty Sarkozy. Everyone knew that Pamela was the only real artist there. The rest of us were just play acting. The sensible ones, like me, figured out pretty early on that the program was a joke. Formulaic. Easy to phone in. Still, there were plenty of students who told themselves they had a shot at creating something beautiful, even as Pamela blew them out of the water again and again. I joined art school because I thought it would be easy, or because I thought I'd be good at it. I can't remember which. I'd grown up reading comic books, and for a while I had this dream of being a line artist. Then, I watched other illustrators finish in an hour what would have taken me 5. I saw how many entry-level jobs ask for whole years of experience. I lurked on r/starving artists regularly. I managed my expectations. I began imagining a future of illustrating construction manuals or safety pamphlets or the fall leaves that rain down the borders of corporate e-blasts. I didn't want these jobs, these lives, but still, they felt lofty. Maybe that's why I started giving up. I don't remember meeting Pamela, but I do remember her first project, a wall-sized hole that might have been a painting or might have been a projection. It was hard to tell. Either way, it had a flickering 3D quality that made me afraid I would fall in. Then, there was the green room vanity, whose mirror made the subjects look like they were laughing. Some say it made a sophomore go insane. But that was just a rumor. Probably. The two of us might never have spoken if we hadn't found ourselves alone in Gothlib, the shared freshman art studio, on a Saturday night. I had taken to sleeping on the communal, resin-stained couch whenever I wanted to avoid my roommates. Pamela hung out there indefinitely. She toiled away as everyone else drew on avant-garde eyeliner and threw parties with themes like cyber apocalypse or nude beach and dungeons and drag queens. I woke up from a bleary nap to find her kneeling on the studio's concrete floor. She was painting something. A clock face. Cadmium red. The hands of the clock squirmed, and not always in the right direction. I dug grains of sleep from my eyes. Salamanders. She had pinned them to the clock, their tails radiating from the center. "They're not real," Pamela said. These were the first words she had spoken to me outside of class. I couldn't imagine what they could be if not live salamanders, but I went ahead and said, of course, anyway. I'd planned a very important conversation for a moment like this, and I didn't want to see it derailed. "Pamela," I started, "I love your work." She thanked me without looking up. "And you're busy," I went on. "I can see that, but I was wondering maybe if you wanted to go out with me. Not now, I mean just sometime." The hour hand thrashed. It was big enough to hit its head against the glass. Over and over. Tick, tick, tick. Pamela shook her head. "I only get together with people to collaborate. I don't see anyone outside of my art." From the way she said it, I could tell she didn't mean to be hurtful. "Well, that's what it would be," I needled. "It's like, a commentary on the classic American date night. We go out for dinner, make small talk, nothing too deep. We're very intentional about the selves we present to each other, personas, as it were, while all the while only you and I know this is a meta performance, performing romantic performativity, pretending to pretend." I felt proud of myself for thinking of this on the spot. I also had a brief flash of gratitude for my crit class, which, if nothing else, had trained me well in the art of bullshitting. Only Pamela didn't look up from her project. She went on painting until my mouth went dry. I coughed. "Obviously, there wouldn't be any romantic entailments. You and I wouldn't even get to know each other. We'll be acting the whole time, which is again a commentary on—" "I get it," she said, wiping sweat from the perfect blonde arch of her hairline. The motion left behind a smudge of red paint. She sat down her brush when she asked, "Can I bring my hidden camera?" When I went to pick her up, Pamela was contorting her body in front of an iPhone. She said she wanted her arms to look deformed in the selfie she was taking. She pushed her shoulders back, crooked an elbow, pouting. Her apartment wasn't how I expected. Most art school home decor springs from a common mold. You'll find spider plants, bookshelves, cat trees, and tchotchkes. Pamela's place, meanwhile, was as bare as a showroom. She said something about not wanting external signifiers to corrupt her inspiration. I nodded as if I understood. That night she wore kitten heels and a pleated poppy-colored dress. Her hair was poofed up, and she looked like Judy Garland or Norma Jean Baker, or some other martyr of 1950s girlhood. At the restaurant, she ordered blackened chicken breast, which she cut into small cubed portions and didn't eat. In clipped sentences, we talked about our siblings, and movies, and television, and our favorite sliced breads. All the while, I tried to figure out whether or not she was acting. I couldn't possibly eat another bite. Acting. My brother Joel, he's a lawyer. Not acting? I'm so glad I came out tonight. Possibly acting. Cruel if acting. I did my best to keep up. I cycled through all my best anecdotes, gesticulating often. Pamela's laughter thrilled me. I didn't even care if it was fake. It was only after I dropped her off and kissed her cheek that I realized she'd never used my name. We had a few classes together, but knowing how first impressions go, I was afraid she'd missed it. Or worse, forgot. Over the next few weeks, I would try to remind her of it as often and as subtly as possible. But she never took the hint. Which is just as well. After all, who was I to take offense? Our second date felt more sincere, which, I don't know, may have been part of the bit. We went for drinks at a bar called Kismet. Photos of dead movie stars lined the walls. In a room cut off by a beaded curtain, 30-somethings wailed karaoke. Pamela wore a floor-length gown and a wilted corsage pinned to her breast. She ordered one cocktail, then another. Soon enough, she was leaning across the booth, holding my hand. For the first time, she began to talk about her art, lamenting the fate of some projects that she could never pull off. When I asked her why, she bit her lip and twisted her hair behind her ear. "No one would want to work with me," she said. "Acting?" Her fingers were cold on my knuckles. I swirled the ice in my drink. "I would," I offered. "I like working with you." She threw her head back, laughing. In the other room, a shaky baritone sang about being so sexy it hurt. "It's not really like that," Pamela said. "I need a subject." "Like a model?" "Kind of." I stared at the empty glasses tombstoning the table, numbed with the strata of drunkenness that makes everything feel far away. Pamela had ordered some grenadine-colored drinks in Collins glasses, and though she sipped them dry, some invisible residue had turned the melted ice pink, like a magic trick. "Most artists, they have a really beautiful way of seeing the world," I started. "But it ends there, you know? All they can give us are reflections of what we already have. But you draw from another world entirely, and anyone from the outside can see that it's holistic, self-sustaining." My eyes stung. I was crying, I realized. Or pretending to. It was hard to tell. Pamela leaned over and kissed me hard. Her tongue was warm and stiff as marble. "You're perfect," she said, once she'd pulled back. I asked if this meant I could be part of her project. She nodded into her drink. "I'll explain more when we get home." Only she didn't, not really. Instead, she took my measurements in her small, sterile bedroom and discussed the theory behind what she was about to do. "It's about bodies," she said, taking note of the length between my elbow and my thumb. "It's about how art exploits the bodies it's claiming to celebrate, historically, contemporarily." "Totally," I said, lifting my foot so she could measure its bridge. "And sometimes it's obvious, like Vivienne Mayer and her photos of those stooped-over street kids. But sometimes it's not. Exploitation is unavoidable, even with the best intentions." Pamela paused to record the diameter of my toe. "Archibald Motley painted his wife in the nude to help her feel beautiful. Now, her portrait is being printed and sold on postcards at the MOA gift shop for $5 apiece." I shook my head and she drew 1-inch intervals down my waist. "Capitalism," I said, not knowing enough to elaborate. "It's baked into the art itself. Every body depicted is exploited, even the ones rendered out of pure love, either sexually, monetarily, didactically." She went on, but I couldn't stop thinking of pure love. When I left, Pamela kissed me on the cheek before handing me my coat from the rack. The whole sequence felt very I Love Lucy, but I felt pointing that out would be redundant. I returned the next day to find a camera set up in the living room. Pamela had cut her hair like Edie Sedgwick. She stood contrapposto, flicking ash from a cigarette. I'd never seen her smoke before. "You need to agree to this on video." She waved her hand, smoke trailing the gesture. "Formality. You know, red tape." "Makes sense." Pamela gave me a clipboard. "I want you to know that I'm very good at what I do." Her eyes were wide and heartbreakingly blue. I noticed she'd pinched her bottom lashes into neat rows of triangles, their pointed tips casting small, web-like shadows beneath her waterline. You'll never be in any pain. Oh. Before I could say anything else, she was rolling. I read from the clipboard. I understand the risk in this procedure. I understand I am the first human trial. I understand that, once the alterations have been made, they cannot be undone. I read every bullet point, a list of 26. Her sentences were succinct. They gave the impression of due diligence, though I came away from them knowing little more than I had before. Her bedroom was dimly lit. There was a film playing on an old CRT. She asked me to watch. A bridge collapsed with several cars on it. An octopus gave birth. A brunette cried into the camera, rubbing her lipstick mouth until her jaw looked blotchy and diseased. A needle pricked my wrist. At first it only felt warm. Then my whole arm felt full, like a bladder. By the time Pamela had it wrapped and bandaged, it didn't feel like anything. You can wash your hands, but don't get your arm wet, she instructed. And please, leave the gauze on. I don't want it to get infected. In class, I stared at the pliable beige of my cast. Pamela was right. It didn't hurt. Not even as a bump began to sprout on my forearm. It was less like a goose egg, more like a finger. I toyed with it, thinking of her. Each day I went to Pamela's house for a new procedure. Soon enough, her cast covered my torso and both my arms. Some areas pulsed hotly, others itched. Sometimes my limbs would make a soft, gurgling sound, as if a faucet were draining. She saved my legs for last. It made it hard to walk to class. Pamela, angel that she was, offered to care for me any way she could. I could sleep in her bed, she said, if I wasn't up to walking home. I assumed this meant we'd be sleeping together, but it didn't. Pamela retired to the living room, shutting the door behind her. A gash of light spilling over the floorboards never dimmed, so I couldn't tell if she was sleeping. In my privacy, I took in the room, the nightstand, the laminate dresser, the curtained window. I fell asleep, imagining I was in her body. Her eyes, my eyes, one and the same. I slept often. The curtains were thick enough to block the sunlight, making it hard to parse night from day. I didn't bother going home. I didn't bother going to class. Instead, I watched videos as Pamela finished her work. Train wrecks, tennis matches, silent films, home videos of a Korean child with a chronic limp. While I slept, Pamela fried rice and arranged platters of sliced fruit. She helped me to the bathroom when I needed it. The mirror was covered by a bed sheet. We left home early on the day of final crit. Pamela had rented a platform truck from school, the kind I had used back when I still went to my sculpture classes. You don't have to walk across campus, she said, lifting me onto the cart. I nodded drowsily. Outside the air was a shock of humidity, half lit in dawn or gloaming. We were the first to arrive by hours. Pamela had set up a little stage. Gently, she unwrapped my bandages as voices began to fill the room. Then, when the time was right, she pulled the curtains back. At first, the sunlight flooding the studio was blinding. I was slow to make out the faces in the room. Professor Hawk, the impressionist, Dr. Donovan, the post-colonial metal worker, and a sea of former classmates. Their mouths hung open. Their eyes widened or darted away. A few of them were screaming. But Pamela didn't notice them. She looked at me, her eyes so deep with tenderness and pride, they seemed like a world within themselves. Over her shoulder, I noticed the exhibit card. Cameron Coates. Pamela Balmer. Biological Mixed Media, 2019. My name. She had used my name. I closed my eyes. I'd never felt so loved.
Oh, I love so many things Elise did in this story. I love how she showed us Cameron's need for a relationship, a connection with other people, and how that need is abused to the limit. Right now, the annual celebration of bloody coloured hearts and chocolate is just a couple of days away, which can be fun and energising, but all too often it's something closer to the performance, the pretending to a pretend that Elise so neatly draws out here. And for Cameron, that performance is filtered through their need for connection. Cameron does that incredibly brave thing of asking Pamela out. We've probably all been there. We know the butterflies in the stomach and the fear that you need to push past. Cameron does that brave thing, and it works in the worst possible way. Cameron is the one who tells us, I didn't even care if it was fake. Cameron is the one who manages to persuade themselves that Pamela didn't mean to be hurtful. Cameron never felt so loved at the end, despite knowing Pamela's work is about how art exploits the bodies it's claiming to celebrate. Cameron doesn't see the horror of what her body has become, so neither do we. Elise only lets us experience it through other people's reactions, which makes it, oh, so much worse. That wonderful line at the end, she had used my name. How that minor acknowledgement, that trivial proof of connection meant everything to Cameron by this point in the story. How that makes it all worth it for her is where much of the horror in this story sits for me. And a round of applause to Kitty for putting Cameron's journey across so well. The horror hasn't arrived yet for Cameron, but it's coming. If you're going to give yourself to somebody without hesitation, you need to make sure it's somebody who will do more than just take. And the world will make it Cameron's fault, because Cameron consented. And the worst part is, Cameron will probably believe them. Awful, wonderful stuff. Thank you, Elise, and to Kitty and Chelsea for making the story sing. If you're a Patreon subscriber, do scuttle across to our Discord and let us know what you thought. And on the subject of subscriptions, PseudoPod is funded by you, our victims. We pay authors, narrators, staff, and the ungodly creatures that keep the service running, and we're really proud of that. But it relies on your generosity. If you can, please go to pseudopod.org and donate by clicking on Feed the Pod. If you can't, and we get it, we really do, then please review us on your podcatcher of choice. Tweet, toot, and post about episodes you enjoyed, and generally make noise on whichever form of social media seems the lesser evil this week. It really does make a difference. And if you like merch, and who doesn't, Escape Artists has a Void merch store with a huge range of fabulous hoodies, t-shirts, and other goodies. And, of course, the weekly incantation. PseudoPod is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 non-profit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Download and listen to the episode on any device you like, but don't change it or sell it. Theme music is by permission of Anders Manga. Next week's story is Oni in the Box by M.M. Schill. You won't want to miss it. Trust me. We leave you with this quote from Andy Warhol. People should fall in love with their eyes closed. Just close your eyes. Don't look. Until next time, stay safe.
An arm appeared from nowhere on the shape, seemingly projected like the pseudopod of a protozoan.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.